I had an interesting video to show you guys. It's from Prager University. They put it out on Instagram. I'm sure I could have found it somewhere else, and this is not a great format on here, but it just really disturbed me, and I took the link, and I mean, it's not going to be like visually disturbing, but the idea is disturbing.
Where?
No, miss, you're not
You
allowed
are.
to sing
You are.
church
You are.
songs outside of church grounds, by the way.
You're not allowed to sing church songs outside
Outside of church or church songs or church
You're not allowed
grounds.
to.
That's fine. That's
You're not
fine.
allowed. She just said you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church.
Our church is outside of church grounds unless you have unless
That's
you've
a load
been
of rubbish.
authorized by the
You're
church to
allowed.
do this kind of song.
He's not saying anything anymore. Thank
Are you saying that you don't care about the Human Rights Act? You're lost.
Freedom of speech, the ability to express yourself. It's a cherished idea.
If you don't know about Greg Lukianoff and the Fire network that he heads up, that's the replacement for the ACLU. They're all about free speech, but that was obviously in the United Kingdom. But what was taking place there was law enforcement telling Christians that they could not sing religious songs out in public. And then, of course, like immediately my brain goes to, the Methodist revival in its time was in large part a response to this culture of separation of like the larger culture from the gospel. And so John Wesley and others were known for becoming more vile and going out into the highways and byways and fields and preaching to people outside of the church, taking the Christian faith to the people. That's a huge part of our heritage here. And I remember during the days of COVID, whenever Christians were told that they couldn't assemble together and sing. I remember when people would put tacks and nails in Christian church parking lots to punish them for coming to worship. I remember when Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, got in trouble for publicly assembling outside and singing psalms together. We forget how close we came during COVID days to autocracy, fascism. It was really scary for a while. And to see that this is still continuing in some places in the West, I was really pleased with our vice president for going overseas and telling Europe how big a problem it is that I've seen footage of Brits getting arrested for praying outside of abortion clinics, praying silently. This is apparently what the vice president talked about was in, I think it was Ireland. It's Ireland or Scotland. I wish I didn't get these two confused. That you can get arrested even for praying in your own home, which is asinine. I just can't believe we're living in such a dystopian time, and we're living in this weird time where there's optimism about these things being restored and going to another extreme with this stuff. But I think there's reason to still be very concerned about what's happening in the West, about free speech, and especially free speech around the Christian faith. And simultaneously, we have these other people saying we need a Christian nation, we need to kick out people who are not Christian or treat them as second-class citizens, we need to have a Christian prince, we need to have explicitly Christian laws, and we're living in an age of extremes where to be a sane person, it's hard to know where to stand and how to navigate these different extremes. And I'm not going to pretend to be perfect at this. It was in Scotland, says Duncan. All right, thank you, Duncan. See, and to imagine, like, in this land, Western culture was only made possible through Christendom, which is not the same thing as Christianity, but it's cultural norms and laws that are based in Christian faith and doctrine. To imagine that we've gotten to a point where that is now not welcome in the West. And this is a larger institutional concern I have. I remember just how much it didn't make sense. Like, I'm about as old school a Wesleyan as it gets. I don't run into much written by John Wesley that I disagree with. And I say I can preach 99% of what he preached with a straight face, things like saying, confessing the perpetual virginity of Mary. I just don't go there with him, but I don't think that's a fundamental difference between me and him. But there are certain things that John Wesley said and did that modern Methodists would disown and say, not welcome. So whenever I was in the ordination process in the United Methodist Church for a decade and couldn't make it through, I hardly ever said or did anything that didn't come directly from a John Wesley sermon or from the Articles of Religion. But what you'll find is institutions that are built on a foundation disowning that foundation. Or it's like, teaching American school children to hate America, and you have to be able to find a way to build on top of the foundation that you've got without tearing it down. Otherwise, it's Jenga, right? And so to have this situation where people are tearing down our culture, our heritage, now hear me, we have to be able to acknowledge where we've failed, where we've struggled, but to act as though Christianity is just not welcome anymore, open Christianity in the public sphere, Christians trying to save people from their sins, to act like that is inappropriate, to have that in the West is just such a failure on the part of the church, to be frank. Of course, worldly powers were always going to do this, but to imagine that we have gotten here has just been a huge failure on the part of the church. So I'm just really sad as I look at that stuff.